I really enjoyed my time watching this. I don't think it was as, didn't stop the world as much as I thought it was going to. What were your initial reactions, and overall, did you enjoy the viewing experience of this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the documentary. I just think that it didn't get into nearly it. I think, like, if we're going to talk about what was wrong with it, like, if I could just give that, I want to talk about that right now. I think the timing of this sucked because there is an active ongoing investigation with Janelle Grant, and she's not interviewed. Like, that there's missing, and it's just like at the end we finally get to it. At the last 15 minutes of the documentary is what I was waiting for 5.5 hours for,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. But if you didn't, like, if you treated this just like a Vince McMahon documentary and learning about the wrestling business, it's great.
Yep.
But if you're going into it without, which I was kind of going into it because I write about this all the time, I'm looking up court documents. Never thought I'd be doing that when I applied to write about wrestling, that I'd be looking up court documents for 5 hours a day. But like, that's what I'm invested, because I want to know what happened. I think this guy's a monster, and I don't care about his backstory as much. I'm glad I watched it. I know
Yeah.
a lot that I didn't know before getting into this. I
Yeah.
don't have any sympathy for Vince McMahon, but maybe some empathy, learning about his childhood and about how he's become the
Hmm.
man that he is. But yeah, there's the timing was the my number one issue with it. There's so much else going on right now. I don't want to learn about the Montreal Screwjob. I already know about it. I don't want to be watching that right now. It was like, maybe in 10 years this would have made sense, or 10 years ago. But right now, it was like, we're talking about the Montreal Screwjob right now for a full episode. I couldn't believe it, but it makes sense. They did not set out to make a documentary about Vince McMahon's sex scandal. It happened in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to this documentary.
No, Bob, I'm right there with you. We were going to start this conversation after this sort of initial, like, hey, how'd you
Yeah.
feel discussing what was the fatal flaw of this documentary? I mean, I don't think it was a letdown, but it wasn't, what we all expected. And by the way, speaking of what we all expected, do you think Vince knew what was going to happen when this documentary came out? He undoubtedly saw it. WWE undoubtedly saw it because they were part in making this. They didn't have final cut per se, but they definitely saw these beforehand. And here's me, conspiracy Tony, coming at you, because when Vince McMahon came out and immediately had a statement saying, I disavow this documentary, they took stuff against my will, they edited stuff, they're coming after me, tried to buy the documentary so it would never get released. I think that got the wrestling community going. I can't wait to watch this. This is stuff Vince doesn't want me to see. This is going to be some dirty shit out there. And do you think he knew what this documentary had, and it really was nothing new? So he put it out there and wrestling. Like, he raised the stakes. He oversold. He overbooked the arena. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he knew
Yeah.
the show was going to disappoint if he put that out there. I think that was a little bit of Vince still playing the game out here. But we were going to talk about what the fatal flaw of this show was, and you said it was the timing, and that was mine as well. I
Oh,
said
okay.
my line I was going to say is, this came out in 2024. If this had come out in 2028, it would have been perfect, because we would have known a
Right.
lot more about this stuff. So instead of saying that, and I completely agree with you, I'll go to my sort of secondary fatal flaw in this, and it comes to, if this is what they were breaking down, this is how they were going to tell it. They were going to tell the story of the Montreal Screwjob and everything else for the non-wrestling fan. What I wanted to see, and we did not see enough of, and this could have been because the sexual scandal came out and they had a plan for the first 4 episodes and the last 2 changed. But if that's the case, extend to 7 and 8 episodes, because we jumped right from the ruthless aggression era. John Cena comes out. We hear a little bit about John, and then suddenly the Undertaker's streak is over. And there's about 15 years that we skipped over entirely in WWE. And that's interesting to me, because it's a product that became completely stale for a long period of time. And a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
people in the wrestling world were wondering, why is Vince doing this? Does he not listen to the fans? He was not on his A game. And so to have the whole stuff with Steph and Shane and Triple H, who's going to take over, I thought that was done pretty well. Learned a lot more about Shane McMahon, but there was a reason that these guys wanted to take over. There was a reason why people wanted Vince to leave, why people wanted Vince to retire. If during the ruthless aggression era, John Cena comes out, we're asking, hey, Vince, you going to retire yet? No way he's going to retire. He's on the top of the world. They just bought
Right.
WCW. The Undertaker suddenly loses the streak, and we don't have that in-between time. We don't have the long period of time where they're trying to push a guy like Roman Roman Reigns, and the merchandise isn't selling. They still have
No.
to focus on the old guys from years ago because their new stars aren't developing. People are angry. We have nothing about CM Punk and the pipe bomb and everything that happened with him, which took over the last 10 years of wrestling. We've talked about CM Punk a lot on this show. I don't like the man, but if you look at from a bird's eye view in the world of wrestling the last 10 years, the first name you see is CM Punk, because that changed the game. And there was nothing about that in his relationship with Vince and him leaving Vince and all the other stuff. They had a bunch of lawsuits in there that were not talked about. That to me was the fatal flaw. So other than the timing of it, which you're completely right, the fatal flaw of this was we heard stuff that we've already heard, yet there was juice on the vine, not the sexual allegation stuff that legally we could not hear from. Like, I get that. There was
Yeah.
stuff to talk about the last 15 years that was completely skipped over. And I'm not talking about going in AEW. I'm not talking about, they were mentioned, but I'm not talking about the new brand split. I'm talking about the last 15 years that really the company might have been going up in stocks, but the product was going down towards the fan. And
Absolutely.
I was really disappointed that wasn't explored.